I'm Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. Hi, guys. Welcome to today's episode. I have Amanda Bauer with me today. She is a quilt pattern designer, a quilter, a lover of all things crafty. She's a girl after my own heart. We also have kids in similar ages, which is kind of fun. But I do just want to preface this episode with saying that Amanda and I get in pretty deep on some of our kind of emotional struggles within the quilting community. So, I think the less nervous I get about being myself out here, the more open I feel about talking about my experiences with quilting and the quilting community and the things that I hope to, you know, hope I'm bringing improvement to. But anyway, I just really enjoyed this conversation and I hope you do too. And go check her stuff out online. She's at the Quilt It List, she's at Quilt It List on Instagram, and you can find her at ALeeBCreative.com. She's got some great stuff out there. She's got some patterns coming out this later this spring, so be watching for that. Otherwise, help me welcome Amanda. Just to clarify really quick, so you have your ALeeB Creative is your
Yeah.
pattern design company?
Yeah, and as much as I love Quilt It List, I had an epiphany in the middle of the night that because what I really want to be doing at the moment, I am very much a person who goes where the paths lead, where the doors open, all of the things, following
Mhm.
the natural progression kind of a thing. And at the moment, that is pattern design. So as much as I love Quilt It List, I'm going to probably be focusing on ALeeB with pattern design for the foreseeable future. So hopefully
Okay.
I can get back to Quilt It List eventually. But
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I
that's
like,
understandable.
yeah, and I like the concept and I like the idea and I like to do all of the things. But right now I'm
Mhm.
like, execution. I have ideas aplenty, but execution is the problem.
Mhm.
And right now I'm like, pattern designs are just coming and I need to like execute them and
Yeah.
all the things.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, in my opinion, I think that's admirable of listening to yourself and listening to where your creativity is leading you, because I think we have all the knowing of the answers inside our bodies and we just have to listen to it. And
Yeah.
I think if that's what all the signs are pointing to for you, then I say go for it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what got you into quilting? Where did you jump into this pool?
Uh, been doing art, been doing needle arts my whole life. But quilting, I did not start until about 2013. My mother dragged me into it, kicking and screaming. I did not need another hobby.
Mhm.
I have not a lot of space and plenty of hobbies to fill that space. And my mom's like, "No, you need to start quilting." And I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I did, and here we are.
Yeah, that sounds like my beginnings. I got dragged kicking and screaming as well by my besties. So,
Yeah.
you're
You
like,
gotta love it. Sometimes it works out. You're like, "Oh, okay, fine. All right. I suppose you were right."
mhm, like, "Fine. I guess I'll give you that credit."
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Did you instantly love it, or did it take you some time to kinda get into it?
Um, Instantly loved it, however, because I definitely was not in a position to quilt by check, I dove in headfirst to all of the things.
Mm,
So, started quilting, immediately with my smaller tops and whatnot, and then decided, hey, I jumped into designing immediately because one of my favorite quilt patterns that I've done, I'd actually designed about probably 2014, managed to screw it up before I figured out how to make it work. But um, from the get go,
wow.
was just interested in doing all of the things.
Yeah, that's so cool. I I'm like yeah, I identify with that too. I was immediately hooked. I've always loved fabrics though. I think my mom's always sewn, and so even as a
Yeah.
little kid, I've been exposed to, you know, sewing and apparel and just different fabrics and all the different crafty things. We've done it all. We've done, the scrapbooking, stamping, we've got crickets, we've got the Sizzix, we've got all the types of things, we'd make our own, bath bombs and,
Uh-huh.
just all the little things, beading and weaving and
Mhm.
I
All
think,
of them.
yeah. And now, being homeschooled too, like we had a lot of time to fill the day in the day. So we'd do our schoolwork and then we'd do something fun and crafty. So
Nice.
anyway, so what machines are you sewing on? What do you have?
I currently have a Juki TL18. Um, I had decided I had a used machine that I was like, I should probably replace this. I mean, that was um, my primary, but I was thinking that I was going to go spend, 3 or 4 grand on a replacement for that. And luckily, there was a owner of a local quilt shop who said, "Why don't you look at this particular machine? It's a straight stitch only.
Mm,
Um, Hands down, the best machine I've ever had."
wow.
I do have a long arm as well that does not live with me. It lives with my sister, but love that. That's an Innova M24. So those are the two things I use.
Okay. I've never used a Juki, but I just hear that people who have them just absolutely love them. So
I haven't heard anybody complain about this
yeah,
one. It is incredibly fast, and if you are primarily doing piecing and free motion quilting, it is by far the best thing that you can get because it's under 2 grand. It is a workhorse, like the thing just never quits.
that's amazing. And that's what you really want, right? You don't want
Yeah,
to have all these little different parts and pieces and sometimes the extra bells and whistles can just get in the way and it's like now this thing's broken. I don't even use that part of it and but I can't do the thing I need to do because that part's broken. It's just like
yeah.
I think those extras can just be a mess.
Yeah, and it's funny because every time I talk to somebody, they've got their go-to regular machine, but even anybody who does the decorative stitching and the embroidery and all that, they've got multiple machines for
Mhm.
that very reason.
Mhm.
And especially if they're doing any kind of embroidery like that holds that machine hostage. So
Mhm.
even if you were able to just sew on it, it would not be what you would be doing because it's busy. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's our case. I mean, we were just using, my mom's had her Bernina 930 for 100 million years. And I say that with all the love and respect in the world, but
yeah.
it's a little older than I am. And but then we got our first Bernina and it was a used refurbished with embroidery because we were like, oh, we want to start making quilt labels. And
Hmm.
then we got another new to us used Bernina that also has embroidery. So it's like, yeah, if one's embroidering, we were kind of like, okay, we only have one machine, but now we can have all three machines working if we
Yeah.
need to. So it's kind of like, oh yeah, you need multitasking situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But my personal machine is just like the most basic model that brother makes.
Hmm.
Um, and say it has some decorative stitches on it, but I just use it for just straight stitch piecing and it's great. I have had it since I started. That's exact like I got it, yeah, 6 years ago when I started quilting and for $100 and it's the best $100 I've ever spent because it still works like a charm.
Yeah, that's funny. I have a real strong opinion about anybody who says, "Oh, these are the things that you need if you want to start quilting. You need a good machine." No, you need a running machine.
Mhm.
When I started, I was using the Singer sewing machine from Sears that my husband balked at getting me when we were first married, but he did it anyways.
Mhm.
Um, I was quilting actual quilts on that with free motion. And so you also don't have to drop your feed dogs. You can
Yeah.
set your stitch length to 0 and move on with life.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I'm like, no, you just need a running machine and a quarter
Mhm.
inch foot. You're good to go.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's such a low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Like, in actuality, you can. It's like you wanna listen to people say what their preferences are, sure, but
Mhm.
that's their preferences, but, like, I did a whole little series of, like, mini series, I guess, of, like, just, like, ways you can get into quilting for, like, low entry, super easy, pop in, here's a cheap machine, here's
Yeah.
some inexpensive tools that will help you out, and, you know, like, I think I was clear in saying, like, I prefer these things, but you don't have to have them and whatever, but just showing that, like, you don't really need a lot to get started.
No. And I know I did a blog post years ago about this very topic, but my thought is just the bare bones, because as you grow in quilting, you will figure out what you like. But if you spent, $3,000 on a really fancy sewing machine that does all of this cool stuff that you realize, I don't actually like to do that kind of stuff. I just need
Mhm,
the basics.
mhm,
And instead, I want to spend all of my money on fabric, or I want all of the rulers, or what have you. You've got the basic stuff that you want, and then the stuff that you upgrade as you go.
mhm.
But just
Yeah,
to get started, it's like, don't go broke getting into this.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like you can get in for so inexpensive and then grow from there, just like you
Yep.
said. It's, you know, you can try things, and if you don't like them, then you don't have to do them, and, if you're like,
And then
"Wow, I
you don't have
really."
to feel bad that you spent a bunch of money on it. You're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't like that, but guess what? I didn't spend $6,000 on all of these things, and
Mhm,
I'm gonna move on to this other area that I love more."
mhm. Yeah, exactly, and I think sometimes those costs hold people hostage to
Mhm.
that thing that they thought they wanted, and instead of just saying, "You know what? I'm gonna pivot and switch gears and do the thing that I really wanna be doing instead of the thing I feel like I have to do."
Yep.
So, that's good advice. I like that because I think I try to advocate for that too. Just go start low, start easy,
Yeah.
and then work your way up, but it doesn't have to be like this super high and hard barrier
Yeah.
to start. But so what is your designing process like? Because you said you have tons of ideas and you have all these patterns that you want to create. So what is that process like for you?
Um It kinda depends, like, there are occasions when you're like, "Ooh, I really like that block," and something just jumps off from there, or there's fabric that I'm like, "Ooh, gotta do something with this fabric,
Mhm,
and I've got a pre-cut with it, so what do I wanna do with it?" So, a lot of things come from just whatever happened to inspire me, working within kinda the limits of, what I've got, with me. So,
mhm.
literally this morning, I was tearing apart because I managed to turn my pieces the wrong direction,
That's the
working on a
worst.
right. Especially when you already put your rows together, you're like, "Oh, mm,
Dude.
mm." Obscenities, all
Mhm.
the obscenities.
Mm,
But I had a specific amount of fabric that I had to work within. This is an obnoxious fish quilt for my husband. So I had bought this fabric. It's been sitting in the stash. This is on my list of things to do to get rid of stash, right?
mhm,
And I'm like, okay, so what can I do with what I have? I didn't really want to go buy a bunch of stuff. Um, Fun fact, now I have more fish fabric than this quilt requires. However, apparently the Guilt will get a charity quilt for a guy.
oh, there
Good
you
fun.
go. Hey, who knew?
But yeah, but when you're working within the limits, you're like, I only have, 2 yards of this, and let's figure out where to place it and what to do with it so that works. So
Mhm,
it really just kind of depends. And what I've started doing is putting any ideas that I've got, whether it's drafting them on graph paper or EQ, I will print them out and then
mhm,
I will put them in a binder so that I can go back and figure math and piecing techniques when that part of my brain happens to be working, or whatever the case may be. I just go
mm,
back to that binder and see what I've got going on and
yeah,
work on stuff. So I wanted to do wanted to do something a couple of days ago, and I did force myself to go back through my binder and decide, okay, which pattern would this fabric work in? Because if I was going to go buy new fabric, I had to use it for a pattern.
Yeah. That's I mean, who needs too many excuses to buy fabric? But I think that's a good, you know, a good excuse. You're like, I'm a pattern designer. I have to go get new fabrics to make my designs.
Well, and I was really trying not to, but I was like, oh, the designer got me.
Mm,
He
I
posted something, and I was like, I wanted that fabric anyways. You jerk. Why'd you post those two things together? And I was like, dang it.
Yeah, it's
So,
always the trick of the trade, right? Like,
eh,
cool, I
yeah.
was gonna quilt my stash, but here I am at
Hmm.
the quilt shop.
Here I am, and I need to up my game on that because,
Mhm.
marketing, it's a thing.
Ugh, yeah, I'm a sucker, but I'm not sad.
No, no,
Well, I
I don't
like the
feel bad.
binder concept too, because that's such a nice reference. You can just go back. It's not like an idea popped in your head and you let it flit away. Like if a
Yeah, and I've done that plenty. And so the binder was something I decided to do, oh, probably early December.
mm,
I was in the same quilt pattern writing class as Ashlyn and Rada were in the fall. And so I
okay.
was trying to make use of all of the ideas and trying to come up with some system because I like systems to make things easier. And I was like,
Mhm.
let me try something different because clearly the random pieces of paper don't work.
You're like, how did that end up in the trash?
Right. Or you lose it and you find it years later. You're like, I was looking for that.
You're like, huh, it's
Huh.
weird that that ended up in the bottom of that pile of fabric.
Yeah, odd, very strange.
Ugh, I mean, when you have limited space too, it's like it's
Hmm.
harder to keep things organized if you don't have systems, and I can
Hmm.
attest to that. But yeah, it's like gotta have those systems in place or things go crazy.
Yeah.
And even in the studio at my mom's house, we have a ton of space. I mean, I say a ton of space. We've taken over like a lot of their house, but
Hmm.
even in there, it gets hectic and it's like, okay, we've got to fix this situation. And so we just keep finding little things to streamline better. And
Yeah.
we just made up a new ironing station. My dad had built this like topper to go on top of the old ironing board. And so it's just like a big rectangular
Hmm.
situation that just sat on top of the old ironing board. And we saw my mom saw something online and was like, "I wanna do this," and it's just like 2 cube shelves
Yeah.
put together, and then the topper already fit on top of them perfectly, and so we now have storage underneath our ironing station, and
Yeah. That is a dream.
it's
Not achievable at the moment, but it is on my list of that's what I will be doing because I have seen that exact setup.
yeah, it's well, because we have all the stuff for the embroidery, like,
Yeah.
we've got a tub of, stabilizer and threads, and we've got all the different hoops and all the things. It was just like piling up, and we're like, where can we put this? And so
Yeah.
now we've got little slots for everything, and we've got kind of bins in there to help organize. And it's just like, leveled up our organization. And my mom's already pretty good at staying organized. And I'll come over on Mondays and she's like already rearranged the whole space again. And I'm like, oh, now I have to figure out where everything is again. Which is like
Oh,
good that it's at her house, but also a drawback because I'm not there all the time to see what she's doing while I'm not around.
yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I'm advocating for that. So if you can ever get to that, having that, then I say do it.
Oh, yeah. We have no idea where we're going to wind up landing. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, the world is just chaos at the moment and
Yeah.
personally and generally speaking. So we're like, we have no idea where we're going to wind up. So for all I know, we'll stay in this tiny little space and the boys will hopefully move out at some point and I can take over their room.
Yeah. You're like, please leave. I need your room. I love you, but get out.
I love you, but you have to, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're one we've got one to go, and it's like he graduates in May, and we're like, "Is it we love you, but can you move out?" Like, no. Just kidding,
Mm,
kind of. But, uh,
yeah, 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 no.
yeah,
When you can see that end of that tunnel, you're like, "Ooh,
yeah,
there's a light and it's not a train coming the
yeah.
other direction,"
Oh,
and
it's not gonna run me over.
that's awesome.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's bittersweet, but it's kinda like
Mhm.
we're like, "Okay, we're ready to be empty nesters."
Yeah, yeah, I think we are in this in between at the moment where, like, I can I don't wanna kick them out, I don't wanna rush them out, I
Mhm,
really don't want them to make some foolish, "You're back here a year from now," kind of thing. You wanna set them up and hope that they go out and
mhm.
make the right decisions, but, the oldest one broke his ankle at work about a month ago, so rather feel like we have a toddler back in the house.
You're like, "And we're back to this."
Yeah, yeah, it's, it's a thing. It's been a year already.
Mm, I agree with that. Oh my god. I literally was like, "How is it only March?
I
How am I not 100 years old right now?" Like,
I feel it.
I don't understand. 2023 has really packed a punch, and I don't like it.
I'm trying to maintain that mindset that it could be worse, but I hate that toxic positivity
Mhm,
mindset where, "Oh my gosh, you're just lucky that blah, 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 blah." Yeah, that may be, but it doesn't mean that I don't get to vent or be,
mhm.
dealing with whatever struggles, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to walk that fine line between realizing that, yeah, there could be a whole awful lot of stuff with also acknowledging that there's already been a whole awful lot of stuff.
Mhm. Right? And that well, at least it's like, don't talk to
I
me
hate
if
that.
that's what you're gonna say
Yeah.
to me. Like,
Yeah.
please acknowledge that I'm struggling where I'm
Mhm.
at, or this has been really hard for me where I'm at, and that's it. That's all. There's
Yeah.
no ands, there's no buts, there's
Yep.
no if only or you're lucky or like I don't want to hear any of that.
No.
Like I'm
No, that is
grateful for
never helpful.
no, and it's like
Never.
I know the good things I have in my life. I
Mhm.
know that things could be worse, but this situation is what I'm facing and this is what I need to deal with and like
Yeah.
don't swoop in and try to like make me reframe my thinking by trying to tell me that I should be more grateful for my life. Like I'm already super grateful for my life, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
just
Totally fine, rant away.
no, no, it's just the toxic positivity I think has negatively impacted a lot of spaces, and so I'm
Mhm.
here for people being real and just saying what their life is
Yeah.
and allowing space to acknowledge that for themselves and acknowledge that for others. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think and then hopefully sewing and creating can help you with that. I know it helps me, but
Oh, for sure.
yeah, kind of a little outlet of emotions, I guess.
Yeah.
So what is your sewing time like? Is it pretty structured for you? Do you have to like do it during a certain time of day or is it just a whenever you can squeeze it in kind of thing?
I very much again go with the flow. So there are days when the math brain is on, and there are days when the math brain is not on.
Mhm,
And I try to have different things that I can do depending upon what the time constraints are or what the brain happens to be doing that day.
mhm,
Um, it kind of depends. I do have chauffeuring duties at the moment, so I try to work around there, and that's the one piece of having your own business that is absolutely amazing is that you
mm,
can make it mold your life more so than not. But I struggle with um, structure. I need to give myself some structure, but as far as actually achieving it,
It's hard when you're not in an environment that forces structure on you. Like I can thrive in structure and I do
Mhm.
well with it, but to create it for myself, I'm like,
Yeah,
I got other stuff to do.
yeah, and I don't know about you, but I tend to dive into something and you realize you've neglected one or more areas, and so then you focus all of your attention for a while on that, and you're like, "Oops,
Mhm.
I forgot the balance again."
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is one thing that and I've heard it in like business books and just different things, but it's that whole idea of like you have to create a schedule for yourself and try to stick to it and da da da. And I'm like, yep, but
yeah,
what
and
if I don't want
I'm really good for a few weeks, and
to?
then you're like, "Okay, yeah,
Mhm.
something changes." So,
Yeah. Yeah.
also a goal for this year, you're just trying add one thing at a time and fix that one thing, and
Mhm.
we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. In the space where you are your own boss and you're running your own business, I think it is okay to change things that aren't working or to just
Mhm.
try something different and then you can always go back to things that did work, but
Yeah.
I think that like inflexible capitalistic idea of you have to go to work and stay in the structure and don't deviate and then go home and that flies out the window when you're your own boss, and so, like, shaking free from that mold that you kinda get stuck in with an 8 to 5, kind of mindset is that's part of that of kind of like, "Oh, I can do whatever I want."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it sounds like, you've got a little military in your life, so structure is top
He
notch over
lost
there.
that a long time ago, though.
Oh,
I
good.
think back when we started dating, he was still rolling his socks the Marine Corps way, and I'm like, "Oh,
Like,
oh
wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah." That has gone away. Now he stuffs them in the drawer like the rest of us. I was like, good job, honey."
Well, I like that easy breezy kind of like, "Oh, we just do craft whenever we want." Because I think sometimes if you try to stay too structured also, like, you might not have creative energy in that moment, and so it feels forced.
Yeah, yeah, and that's part of the reason. I mean, having things at different stages, and that was kind of the rationale for my thinking, so that when I'm not feeling particularly creative, I can go, okay, well, there's math to be done, or there's piecing to be done. um, but when I'm feeling in a particularly creative mood, then I'm going to sit and play on my computer, or get the
Mhm.
graph paper out. um, that I just prefer that. I know there are lots of people who are like, "Oh, nope, I'm gonna set aside this time," and that's awesome that that works for them. I can't roll with it, so
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely like, again, honoring yourself and where you're at and what your strengths and limitations are, and just accepting that about yourself and not trying to fit yourself into someone else's mold, I think is key, and especially business ownership, like, you have to do what works for business. I mean, there's tried and true practices that, like, probably you should follow if you want your business to be successful, but at the same time, like, I think there's still a lot of room to do things in a way that fit you and your personality, so
yeah.
how many I wanna know how many quilts you have in your house
Oh
or how
god.
many quilts you've kept around.
Um, so probably probably kept about 3 dozen. I try to keep anything that is related to, like, a design that I did, or, um, obviously anything that I made for family members, that kind of a thing,
Mhm,
but probably 3 dozen. That said, I did go through last summer, and, that pile of tops that we all have.
mhm.
Um, I looked at them and I said, "I don't want this. I don't care why I pieced it. I don't want it." So I've been quilting those to donate, because
Okay.
now I'm all hot and bothered to get rid of things, like, in a useful way.
Yeah.
But I don't need them. Like, I don't have that much space and I don't need them. So, yeah, I try not to hold on to a ton. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it happens, but
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's hard to let them go. Like, there's a few that I'm like, "Oh, I could get rid of that," and then I go to do it, and I'm like, "Mm-mm, no, can't do it."
yeah. Yeah, there
But
are definitely some that I'm like, that will never leave."
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. I think I have around 20 in my house, but I think I obviously have made way more just due to the nature of my business, but,
mhm,
um, for myself, I think I have around 20 in my house, and then I've made obviously made and gifted some, but, yeah, it's hard. Like, when your business is to make quilts for other people, it's kinda hard to find time to keep making quilts for yourself, and so, I do have a quilt top that I finally, uh, finished up, and it's literally I got a fat quarter bundle of Tula Pink All Stars when it came out.
mhm,
The revision was it in 2019, I think?
okay.
I don't know. Anyway, and I was like, "I'm not cutting these up." So I literally just, like, modified this pattern I had and just kept the fat quarters the same size, and so it's a monster.
Nice.
I like when people keep a lot of their quilts. They're practical and,
Yeah.
if you're doing this thing you love but not keeping your makes, it's like I can get behind the charity thing, but
Well, so many of the ones that I decided were gonna go to charity, they were other patterns that I'm like, I made it because I wanted to make it, right?
mhm,
But I don't necessarily have an attachment to it for any particular reason, but I started business so quickly in relationship to starting to quilt. I was
mhm,
like, I should probably hold on to these because I'm thinking, fast forward as you go to somebody's trunk show, you're like, oh, yeah, I probably should actually keep some of these quilts.
mhm,
One particular story, I because I like to back all of my stuff in muslin because it's
mm,
soft and it's cheap. So um, I learned the hard way with one of the cover quilt for my favorite pattern. Um, Learned the hard way you pre-wash that muslin
mm,
because it shrinks at a different rate than the
okay.
top quilt. So if you didn't know that,
I
yeah,
didn't.
pre-wash the muslin because it's a
Okay.
great back, but again, it shrinks at a much higher rate. So I had done cool quilting on it and all of this stuff, and then washed it, and I was like, oh, I lost about 2 inches, and the whole top is all crinkly. Like it's cool, still my favorite quilt to use, but I had
Mhm.
to remake the top.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was like, oh
Ugh,
well,
lessons learned.
oh
Oh,
well.
no, I have to make another quilt.
I know. And I was able to find most of the fabrics that I used because I was super partial to what I had put together for that. It was frustrating, but
Yeah,
a lesson learned and one I like to share because
yeah. Well,
so
that's good to know because I think sometimes if you haven't worked with a fabric, like, I don't think I've worked with muslin in that way, so I never would have known to wash
well,
it.
and the first time somebody brought something to me to quilt for them and they were using muslin, I was like, why would you spend all of this energy and time on that? And I was like, oh, actually, when you wash it, it's super soft.
Mhm.
It quilts great, and it's way cheaper than backing fabrics. So
Yeah,
I hate piecing backs. Don't like them as a quilter. Don't
yeah,
like to piece them.
yeah.
And yeah,
Mm,
so
nice.
if you
That's
haven't tried, it's
no, that's good info, and you can get the wide stuff too, like,
mhm,
for pretty same inexpensive, and I don't like to piece backings
yeah,
either, so I was trying to buy extra wide, and I
yeah.
put minky on almost everything, so I just try to get the extra wide, but also,
I
uh
learned a lesson with that too.
yeah,
How to load it on the long arm.
yeah.
Oops.
Yeah. It
Thankfully, it was for my son, so it didn't really matter. But I was like, that was the wrong direction.
oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes it's easier to load it one way versus another, but and I
Yeah.
It's been so funny because, and I know I've talked about it before, but just that like certain people will be like, "Oh, you can't quilt on Minky." And I'm like, bullshit. Yes, you can."
Yes, you
And
can.
we've literally had people bring stuff to us and be like, "I really wanted Minky on the back of this, but at the quilt shop, they told me that nobody would quilt on Minky." And I was like, "Who said that? I'm gonna go slap them for
People do
you."
it all the time.
Yeah. And we literally carry Minky just because we use it so much and we love to like offer it to people who maybe
Yeah,
they've never considered it, but you know, it's like, no, I advocate for it because I love it on everything. And it's not right for every project, but
yeah.
there's just so many different like styles and textures and,
Mhm.
just different colors, and you can really enhance a quilt with it. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's wild. But it's
yeah.
not that hard to quilt on. People make it seem like it's so hard to quilt on, and it's not.
Well, I don't use it a ton
Mhm.
just because I'm not it's not the style of quilts that I'm making. I don't make a ton of stuff for kids anymore. I mean, mine are, you know, when I made this one for my son some years ago, it's not even actually Minky. It was a different, I forget whose product it is. Same concept.
Yeah.
I just didn't understand the person when she said load it this way, like we were not speaking the same language. And so
Ah.
I loaded it with the stretch going the wrong way.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
And so when you pull it taut to quilt it, it's like, "Oh, yeah, that shrunk
It gets like an
a
hourglass shape.
lot." Yeah, it's anyways. Um, but it drives me crazy when they say you can't do X, Y, or Z. It's like, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah. Watch
It's
me.
like the people going, "You can't put batiks with quilting cottons." Yeah,
You
they're all
can.
cotton.
Yeah.
You can, and you know what? You can even put satin in there too if you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah. You gotta know how to work with it, but you can do it.
That's the thing. It's like as long as you understand how everything is going to behave, do what you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what Rada and I were talking about too. Like, just use whatever fucking fabric you want. Like, it's not,
Right. And
it's,
listening to that conversation, it was kind of funny because I was reminded, and that was right before the upcycle day for the IG Quilt Fest
oh,
thing. And I
yeah.
was like reminded that I'm itching to tear apart my wedding dress. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, because it's absolutely stunning, but I have boys. Like,
yeah.
this dress is gonna sit in a box forever if I don't
Yeah.
do something with it. And I'm like, I want to do something with it. And so I'm trying to destash so that I can tear that apart and put it in a box where the stash currently lives so that then I can, when some project happens that I'm like, ooh, that is an outstanding idea,
Mm-hmm.
then I've got it
Wow.
ready to pull from.
That would be so cool. And then
Yeah,
you've got it as a memory and you don't have to keep a dress that you're never going to wear again in your closet
exactly.
or in a
And like,
box.
what is the point? Because nobody's ever going to see it again. And it's
Yeah.
such, it was just like, yeah,
Yeah. That's a crazy idea. I like it.
yeah. And I don't know what that's going to look like. And I'm sure, you know, it's appealing to keep some of it to do some sort of project for each of the boys for the wedding in particular. You
Mhm.
can something old, right?
Sure.
But who knows when that's coming? So hopefully no
Exactly.
time soon.
Yeah. You just kind of never know what life's going to throw
No,
at you.
yeah. Like who would have thought
Yeah.
25 years ago, it just,
Mhm. Oh, I just laugh at myself, like, because when I was in high school, I just thought I'd have my shit together by the time I was 25.
don't we all?
I was like, that came and went a long time ago, and I still don't have my shit
Yeah,
together, and I
no,
like it that way.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely on board with
Mm,
not having any idea what we're doing.
yeah. I'm like, it's just a freaking roller
It's
coaster all the
worked
time.
out okay so far,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I'd rather be on this ride than the ride I thought I was on. So
for sure.
that's that's for damn sure. But
Yeah.
it's you just gotta take life with a grain of salt, I think, sometimes, and just laugh at it and move on. Because I think like
Yeah.
like we were saying, this year has been a punch in the face so far, and
It's been a shit show.
yeah, but it's
Let's
just kinda
just call
like
it what it is.
yeah, it's but it's like, what do you do? Sit and wallow, or do you just keep finding ways to move forward and
Yeah, it's kind of funny because this is may or may not sound callous. I don't know. My grandmother passed away at like 12:30 on New Year's Day,
oh,
like 12:30 a.m. So thanks, Mom.
yeah,
11:30 on the 31st was overrated. You had
yeah.
like, I love and adore my grandmother, but she had stopped being herself a
Mm,
while ago. But when you think about it, you start like everybody starts the year out. You're going, oh, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z. You have your
mhm,
plan, right? And
mhm,
I had my plan. I had my email plan. I had all these things, and I'm like, wow,
mhm.
okay. And it wasn't unexpected, but it still, I was like, son of a bitch. And
Yeah,
then I got to thinking about it and I'm like, but my grandmother was the generation where she's like, handle your shit and move on,
mhm,
so
yeah,
I feel conflicted because,
mhm,
that was the intro to the year. But at the same time, I'm like, she's not wrong.
yeah, yeah, and I think it's okay to, like, acknowledge how you're feeling and live in that space, but, like, stopping your life and freezing
Yeah.
up, like, I used to freeze up so much, I'd get so stressed out and I would just freeze up and didn't know what to do,
Hmm.
and my husband and I talk about it all the time that, like, you get freedom no matter what your financial or economic situation is in life, you get freedom when you decide that you understand that you have choices, like, you're not ever stuck in the way that your life is, and those some of those choices might be really hard and scary to make, but like you get to make that choice, like
Yeah.
that's your innate right as a living breathing being on this planet. You get to choose, and so
Yeah. We are not trees. We don't have to
mm,
stay where we were planted. And
no,
we can decide any given day to do something different than what we have been doing. And
yeah, and if your life isn't working, then shake it up. Like,
yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing that you know i I think as an anxiety sufferer for so long, like I craved that structure because it meant that I could control so much around me. And I did not thrive with change and chaos. And the more I've embraced that I have choices and I get to make decisions and I'm not just, you know, stuck with whatever life throws at me.
Well,
It's
and think about it this way, because this is the one thing that I decided to consciously go into this year doing. I started a little bit last year and, well, I started, to be fair, a little bit a few years ago, but not deliberately.
mhm,
I call it planting seeds.
mm,
So we have no control over what the outcome of this is, but we can control how many opportunities we take or we create for ourselves,
mhm,
or how many connections we make, how many, like how many patterns we release. Like we can control those things. We can't
yeah,
control how it's received,
right.
but we can control what we are doing. And
Mhm,
so that's my thought this year. It's like I can't control what I can't control, but I
right,
sure as shit can control what I'm doing,
right.
you know.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the more we embrace that concept, and I think too, like, that people pleasing aspect and, like, being quote unquote "nice"
Uh-huh.
has taken over our society to the point where, like, people can't have honest conversations anymore. People don't know how
Yeah.
to honor their truth and be okay with it and have hard conversations, and I'm a sufferer of that too. Like, I don't know if suffering is the right word, but, like, it feels like suffering sometimes when I know I need to have a hard conversation and I am sweaty and I almost poop my pants and like, I get so anxious and scared about it because I'm so worried about disappointing someone that
Yeah.
I'd rather continue suffering and just deal with it than do something about it. It's like, "Oh, no, I actually get to do something about this." Like, I can stop the situation if
Yeah.
I want to, and that has been extremely freeing, especially in this last, year and a half of not being a teacher anymore and trying to create this path I'm on, and trusting the process has been so scary, but every
Yeah.
time I've kind of deviated from it, I'm very quickly reminded that, like, no, no, what you were doing was just fine.
Yeah.
Stop jumping off the path because you're scared.
And isn't that interesting how quickly that occurs? Because I, again, firm believer in any kind of, in I have, my belief system, and whoever can believe, like, however, whoever you want to credit this to,
Mhm,
but those reminders that no, no, you didn't misread. You were on the right path. You were exactly where you were supposed to be, and that is what you should be doing. And
mhm,
how quickly, when you make a change before something comes up that you're like, oh, wait, no, that was the wrong move.
mhm,
And it's almost immediate at this point if you're paying attention to
mhm,
your life and you're doing what you're really supposed to be doing. You're like, it's quick. Those
mhm,
little, "Oh, hey, no, course correction. Go back to what you were doing. You were on the right path. You were headed in that direction."
mhm. Yeah, it is just that little bit of consciousness to what that is and what that feels like, and that
Yeah.
little bit of, like, self-witnessing is so
Mhm,
powerful, and,
mhm,
like, really grabbing the harness of knowing that you're you are a powerful creator of your own life experiences. Like, I have to hang on to that, like, affirmation.
mhm.
I got that one from, Dr. Nicole LaPera. She's a psychologist, and she puts tons of free and super accessible information out on her Instagram and her, podcast, but I'm working through one of her workbooks right now called How to Meet Yourself. And it's
Okay.
just that whole concept of, like, self-witnessing and, like, understanding your patterns with, like, a neutral but, like, compassionate outlook of, like, just observing yourself. Why do you do what you do when you do it? And the more you understand those things, the easier, like you were saying, it is to see those course corrections, like, "Oh, shit, I did it again. I need to jump back on the path. I hopped off because I was scared," or "I
Yeah,
caused a fight because I was in fight or flight mode," or "I froze up because, my nervous system was out of whack," or whatever. It's like, all those little things are so powerful.
yeah.
And I think too, like, there's a ton of pressure out there to be and do a certain thing, but I don't like it.
No.
I don't like the pressure. I wanna do me. I wanna do what I wanna do, and I love when I can see and tell that someone else is doing that same thing.
Well, and, I don't, and I can never remember where this saying came from or who said it, but that, when you get to a point in your life where you become the person you were always meant to be, because we spend so much of our younger years conforming,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
by design in a lot of ways. It's like,
Yeah.
sorry if this offends, but it just is what it is. But the education system,
Mhm,
like, the whole damn thing was designed to create compliant factory workers.
mhm.
Um, that isn't beneficial
No.
to us as individuals or anything. And so when you spend 12 out of your, 12 years in school being trained to fit
Mhm,
in a box, you're like, when you finally stop trying to fit other people's expectations of you or to stay in the box that they think that you should be in,
mhm,
it's simultaneously terrifying and also super freeing.
mhm. I strongly advocate for education in the sense that, like, learning, I think, is so important, and educating yourself is so important, and you don't have to be, like, a university educated person to have lots of knowledge and lots of understanding, but I think, like, there is so much power in knowledge and
Yep.
understanding, but I also think that our current system is not serving the strengths of our population as a whole, and so definitely something's gonna have to get overhauled, but
Yeah,
it's
for
not gonna be
sure.
me.
No, no, I want no part of it.
I'm just gonna sit in my corner and quilt stuff and
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Totally, slightly education related and also previous episodes. So about midway through your conversation with Ashlyn, and I
Mm,
listened to the podcasts on like faster speed, so I lost
mm.
track of who actually said this.
Oh,
Um, you guys were talking about beginning quilt classes at local quilt shops and wanting them taught differently. And sincere question because I'm just like I am a big why
mm,
person. So been this way my whole life. Like I want to
sure.
understand the purpose behind something so then I can say, and just slight tangent, the
Mhm,
workplace. If you're asking me to gather data, I
mhm,
want to know all the things that you want to do with that data because I don't like rework. I like to understand what the end result is going to be so
mhm.
then I can get it in the right way.
Right.
So I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, so you want it taught differently, but what does that look like?
yeah. I think maybe Ashlyn was saying that, but because I don't exactly remember either, but I think the result of a lot of quilting classes is that they're taught a certain way. The teacher just tells people, you just do it this way. This is the only right way to do things. And so then people leave thinking that they can only sew or they can only quilt in a certain way, or that there's only one way to make a border, or there's only one way, to piece things together. And I think the result of that is a lot of like it pushes a lot of people out because then they are like, well, if I don't do it right, then my quilt isn't going to be good enough. And so I think for me, from my perspective, and again, like I said, I don't exactly remember who was saying what either, but I think from my perspective, just as a whole, the quilting community is fantastic and I love it, but there's also still like a subset of people in the community who really like to gatekeep the information about
Yeah,
quilting, and then they like to push their perspective as the only perspective, and we gotta stop doing that. If we want
for
future
sure.
generations to quilt, we have to stop side-eyeing people's makes, we have to stop judging how people came to creating their piece of art,
Yeah,
and we have to just open it up and say and like you said, explain why you're saying what you're saying. Don't just tell me, "Well, this is just how you do it." Okay, Brenda, but why?
but why? Well, and so I
Sorry if your name is Brenda, by the way.
totally not.
I'm not naming anybody specific. It's just a name that popped in my head. Anyway.
I don't know. I like Brenda better than Karen. Karen's overused.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So
and
we're
Brenda
going with
works.
Brenda.
Brenda works. No, because I mean I'm thinking even back to quilting for other people.
Mhm,
Um, that'll teach you a lot of things.
mhm,
And the one thing that I'm like, the one corner I no longer cut for my own peace of mind is squaring blocks because
mm,
like as tedious as it is, I know that what I want at the end of the day for any given piece, like if I am working on something that I want a custom quilt, I'm
mhm.
like, nope, you better believe I'm going to be squaring those blocks. If I were going to put something in a show, yeah, um,
Yeah. Mm.
I'm going to be doing that just because it'll
Right.
fix the overall outcome. But it's
Mhm,
interesting that I haven't really arrived upon any sort of consensus is not the word. Like I've tried to, ask people gentle questions like, "Hey, did you do this when you pieced?" "No." "Okay, just so
mm,
you know,
mhm,
um, if you do that, it will help X,
mhm.
Y, and Z issue." And it's amazing to me that even no matter how gentle it is, no matter how real the thing is,
Mhm.
people are funny.
Yeah.
People are
Funny
funny.
is a word for it, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I'm very curious because I've, again,
Mm.
always been the why, like, tell me
Yeah,
why I need to do stuff, so then,
yeah.
truth be told, I never measure a border, ever, ever, ever.
Oh,
I don't
really?
care.
Yeah.
No, I don't do it. I know how,
Mhm,
so all of my instructions will tell you, "This is how you should do it."
mhm.
I never do
Yeah.
because I don't care, and I'm quilting my own stuff, so as far as I'm concerned, when I'm cursing myself as I'm, putting a pleat in my border, that's my own fault.
Right.
but it's just, it's like learning the rules so that you can break them, you know?
Exactly. Yeah,
You know,
you can't break the rules unless you know the rule and then you know why you're breaking it. And
why, you know?
and yeah, it's that why, like why, and I think that's where that sentiment comes from of like wanting it done differently. Tell me why I need to do things this way. And then that way I can decide for myself what works best for me. And I'm with you. Yeah. Square your damn blocks. If you want a straight ish, because I mean, what quilt is ever completely square?
Yeah, no.
None that I've ever made. But
No.
you will get a better result if you square your blocks and you measure your borders and you don't do bias seams on your bordering. And I know I've said it a million times, and because it's true every single time, anytime I've quilted for someone else and their border contains bias seams, there's always extra volume that doesn't need to be there. And
Mhm.
so if you're bringing me your quilt and you want me to keep it square, then there's certain things that I want from you, and I will explain why, because I'm not going to just say, well, it just has to be this way. I'm going to tell you exactly why I want it that way. And if you don't care that your border's going to have pleats in it, or I have to put some folds into your quilt top because you didn't square your blocks and you're fine with it, then that's fine. As long as you
Yeah,
know and you can make that decision, and you're fine with it, then that's fine with me too. I just
yeah.
I don't like you just have to accept this information and don't question it. It's like, well, I'm gonna question it.
I'm gonna question it. My favorite word is why,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think,
after some obscenities.
yeah, for sure. Of course. Always in there. I mean, I do have the moniker of cussy quilter for a reason. So it just is what it is. I'm sorry, mom.
I'm sorry, there's always room for an F-bomb.
You raised a pirate. I don't know what to tell you. It's fine. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think truly that's where that comes from. And that's where any sort of perceived criticism of the quilting community comes from, is like, I'm just tired of people being so judgy, and I'm just tired of people being so like disclusive. Is that a word? I don't care. I'm making it up.
Uh, sure.
If inclusive is a word, disclusive is a word, okay?
Exclusive.
Well,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I'm gonna
yeah,
say disclusive because I like it
sure.
better. It's just the idea that like certain groups of people or certain ways of thinking are kept out, and I don't like that.
So let me ask you this because I have noticed, um, within our own smaller circle, right?
Mhm.
So I have encountered some of that, I just call it the grouchy old. And honestly, they're not old. Like that's
No.
the disturbing part. The particular group of people that I'm like most um annoyed by, they're actually probably early 60s. I
Mm,
mean, they're not even
yeah,
the older half of the quilting generation. But
sure.
what I think is interesting is when they know you, you suddenly drop in their sort of estimation. And I would go back to putting people in a box. Like
Mhm,
they have their expectations of you and your abilities.
mhm,
So if you stand up there and you're teaching or you're, doing something and they're like, "Well, how dare you
mhm.
put a pattern out? How dare you do something like this?" And they don't say that
Sure.
except with every look on their face. And,
Mhm. Yeah,
well, I'd have to buy all this yardage. Y- Yeah,
that's
like
how you
you
make
would
quilts.
buy for any pattern. Like,
Yeah,
what kind of question is that? I mean, come on. But it's
yeah.
interesting to me because they will do that and they
Mhm,
they want you to fit in their little set of
mhm.
expectations that they have for you.
Right.
And that is just it. That's all there
Yeah,
is to it.
yeah.
um
Well, it's super sad too, because I think there are so many amazing, welcoming, non-judgmental
mhm,
people in the quilting community, and I
mhm.
am so grateful to have met and been around so many of them. And But the ones that can't handle that inclusivity and can't handle the openness of the newer generation of quilters, and not all of the newer generation of quilters are like that, some of them are snarky bitches too, but,
Yeah. Yeah, I've met
you
some of
know,
them too.
so I think that, like, old granny quilter, quote, unquote, mentality doesn't necessarily apply to all quilters of a certain age. It's like, if you have that mentality and I think it's that stereotypical person, like you said, who wants you to fit in their box, who wants you to do things the way that they want you to do them. Otherwise, they harshly judge you, they talk shit about you,
Hmm.
they let you know that they hate your stuff. It's like, just don't talk to me. Like, you don't
Yeah.
have to tell me that you don't like me. You can move along.
Scroll
And
by.
my experience is my experience. And, I think that's where the line gets drawn, is that it's that, like you were kind of saying with your grandma, that, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get shit done. It's like, okay, great, but I also have emotional damage that I need to also
Well,
live
and
with.
it's I like to do that happy medium, because the
Yeah,
reason I even say that is because there is value in that. Okay,
yeah,
let's acknowledge how we feel, but let's not pack up and live there forever, because
exactly.
there's that. And we see it all over society these days. It's like there's
Right.
people who are like, I'm acknowledging what I've gone through, what I am going through,
Mhm.
all of the things, but I still need to acknowledge that I have some choices here,
Right.
and I
And
can choose some different things. So there's
right.
that. Take from every experience in every generation something,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that just happens to be what I took from my
Yeah.
grandmama at the moment, is get your
Yeah.
shit done. So
Yeah, which I agree with you. I think that happy medium of it, like, acknowledging and honoring where you're at, and then also finding a way to move forward and
yeah.
grow is super important. I just think some people have gotten stuck in the way that their lives are, and they don't want
Yep.
to see people thrive because they didn't get to thrive. And
That right there, that is exactly what it is, because I sit
mhm,
there in particular with this collection of people that I'm thinking of. We've all met them, like they
mhm,
exist everywhere, but I
yeah,
think it is because they felt like they were not allowed to be different, to do different. They had to fit in the box. They were
mhm,
told a certain, they were given a certain set of expectations that I don't have to live with.
right,
So I
right,
benefit from them,
mhm,
in the sense that I can move on and do what I want. I'm not told that I'm not allowed to do something anymore, but
right,
you're not being told that either. Like, there is precisely nothing stopping you,
mhm,
random person, from
yeah,
deciding, hey, if you have a dream of doing X, Y, or Z, go after it, because
yeah,
who cares?
go do it. Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
I think that's just it. And I think in doing this podcast and in my presence in the quilting community, wherever I'm at,
Hmm.
in my guild, at the quilt shops here, in my business, my goal only ever is to reach out and say, this is a safe space for you.
Hmm.
If you are going to come at me with your shitty attitude and try to boss me around, I don't have room for that. I love
No.
you, but respectfully go away.
Hmm.
Um, and that's really hard for me because I am rejection sensitive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know I'm opening myself up to that by doing what I'm doing.
Hmm.
But I also know that I'm probably going to find more people who think like I do than the who think differently, and it's okay for people to think differently. I'm not saying that you can't think differently. I'm just saying, like, if it's going to be in contradiction to what I'm trying to do, and you're going to try to put a barrier in my way of going where I'm trying to go, then I don't need that.
Yeah.
And other people don't need that either. Like, your judgy mentality isn't helping anybody. It's just hurting you in the long run because you're pushing people away with it. Whereas, you know, there's a lot of us trying to recreate this space so that everybody feels safe in it, so that
Yep.
everybody can come in and make what they want to make. And share it with pride and not get a bunch of backlash from people saying, you didn't make your corners right, or you didn't do that right. It's like, ugh, you don't have,
Pick what you
again,
want and keep your mouth shut and move on with your life. Nobody cares what you have to say.
exactly.
Like,
It's like,
you know,
please just, if someone's truly being obnoxious and offensive and disgusting, then call them out. But like,
yeah.
if it's someone's quilt that they made and they're super proud of their artwork,
Yeah, and that's the funny part. It's like, how hard is it to just simply not like how many times have we seen a show and tell where somebody's like presenting their thing and you're like, "Ooh, I don't dig those colors," but you
mhm,
just smile
mhm,
and keep your mouth shut. Like,
yeah,
it's fine. You don't
yeah,
have to have an opinion.
might
Well, you
not
can
be
have an
my
opinion. You
favorite.
don't have to share it.
Sure. Right. Well, and that's the thing too, is I think like that it is that way with everything that you're you as a person, not you specifically, but like
Yeah.
us as human beings, we aren't going to be for everyone,
Mhm.
and that's okay. And when we can accept that about ourselves, then we can accept that about other people. And
Mhm.
especially, with how far and widespread people's, makes and shares go because of social media,
Yeah.
they're open to a wider audience and open to
Yeah.
more people thinking that they can criticize your shit. And that's fine. Like you said, you can have your opinion, but you don't have to share it. Like I
Yeah.
don't want to hear if you don't like my quilt, just don't say anything. And
Yeah.
I'm still gonna, whether you like it or not, whether you comment or not, I'm still going to do what I'm doing because
Yeah.
my experience is my experience. And if you don't like what I have to say about my experience, then maybe look in the mirror, you know,
Yeah.
maybe take a moment to go, why is that bothering me that she doesn't like when people act this way towards her? Well, you know,
Yeah.
it might be calling out something that person's doing, and that's probably why they don't like it. And I just think people aren't looking at themselves in the mirror enough in that sense of like
Correct.
understanding why they're doing what they're doing. Why are people responding to me this way? Well, you're probably being real ugly. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I I've just had some recent run-ins too with some people that just they're like, "Ugh, your stuff clearly isn't geared for me, but here's why I don't like it." And I'm like, okay.
Well, if it's not geared for you, then I don't need your input.
Yeah. It's like, I'm sorry, but I'm also not sorry. Like I'm talking to people who are having these experiences and need to feel heard and need to feel seen, that like, yes, I love quilting, but I also am so tired of feeling like I'm being judged everywhere I go and
Mhm.
around every corner. And unless I'm putting my quilt into a juried show, I don't need
Yeah.
your judgment.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to say about that. Oh my gosh. But I do want to express gratitude for all the people who are working to buck the status quo
Yeah.
and recreate this space to be more welcoming and to be more inclusive. Ooh, I do have some more quilting questions I want to ask you. If we can,
Okay.
if you don't mind switching gears a tiny bit
That's totally
after all
fine.
that, unless you're like, I'm sick of you, I need to go. Uh,
You're fine.
okay. Well, I do just want to know, like, if you have a favorite quilt you've ever made, and like what about it makes it your favorite?
Um, Underwater basket weaving, which the part that makes it my favorite, it was the first design that I had come up with. And when I finally figured it out, like this stupid quilt goes together ridiculously quick, but it looks complicated.
Mhm,
Definitely not easy to piece. I sized it for the pattern that's currently out there, so you
mhm,
can I think I have it in 3 sizes, but
okay.
scaled it rather was the word I was looking for, but that happens to be my favorite only because it's just it's a personal attachment. It was sort of where stuff started.
Yeah,
So,
cool. Yeah, I was looking at your patterns and they're so pretty, and I'm excited to see more that you're
Yeah, I've got at least 6
designing?
that are in process, and I'm gonna do, working on a block of the month that I'm gonna do with one of the local quilt shops here,
Mm,
just for them, and so when we're done through the store, I'll put that up as well. Um,
awesome.
yeah,
That's exciting.
it's different. I haven't done one before, and I literally have never done one. I have a block of the month kit that
Okay.
somebody had brought to me, and I wanted to custom quilt it. And I was like, there's no way they're going to pay me to custom quilt that because that would have cost a bloody fortune. But I found the
Mhm.
kit and I'm like, okay, I haven't made it yet because, busy. And so
Yeah.
I'm like fumbling my way through trying to, figure out the way that it makes sense in my brain to put this together and to have people make it because I personally value efficiency
Mm,
over a lot of other things because I don't want you to get frustrated and bored. I want you to be able to move through a design reasonably quickly.
mhm.
Doesn't have to be done in a day. Underwater basket weaving, if you're doing the throw size, could easily be done in a day.
Right.
But that's what I like. So working on a bunch of stuff, and that's I aim to have twice as many on my website as I do now by the end of the year. So
That's awesome. That's so cool. And that like, what a fun thing to collaborate on is, doing your own little block of the month, and that's it probably so exciting for them too. Like, I don't know.
well,
I
it
just
is fun, and they're a newer shop,
mhm,
and it was one of those. There's another shop in the area that also wanted something. They wanted something that you couldn't just go to a fabric company and get at any shop because
right.
they want their customers to come to them
Sure.
for a reason. And I was like, well, that's a perfect opportunity. Like I have no issue
Mhm.
um collaborating, and I'm actually collaborating with them at the moment on a challenge. It's called the Color Cube Challenge. Sarah Renee Clark, who is out of Australia, has these amazing color cubes, and she took photos, stunning photos, and created palettes out of them.
Okay.
Um, so check her out.
Okay.
These are phenomenal resources. And so we had
Yeah.
them pick a number, and they have to make a project with four of the colors on the color palette. And so far people seem to be really excited. Most of them were like, not my thing,
Mhm.
but it causes you to kind of stretch those creative muscles in a direction that you might not otherwise have gone.
Right.
So
That's a fun way to do that because I think we get stuck in a rut choosing,
absolutely.
the things that we like to choose, and then it's hard to pick anything different. It's like I would never have looked at certain colors had I not worked with them on other people's quilts, or,
Mhm.
quilted someone else's quilt made with a certain color palette, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I never would have thought to mix those together," but
My favorite thing to do now is to add sort of a gold color.
mm,
Goldenrod would be probably the closest name that I could come up with to blues and teals and
yeah.
purples. Never would have thought about it, except I
Mm-mm.
had a customer who brought that in, and I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, that works. That
Yeah.
works
Well,
astoundingly well.
yeah, it really does, and, like, that freaking color wheel, it's crazy how, like, it's like I will tend to stick with cool colors and, like, ignore the warm ones
Hmm.
because I don't gravitate towards the warm tones or warm
Yeah,
colors, but, like, anytime it's like, yeah, that goldenrod is gonna pair well with purples, it's gonna pair well with blues, it's gonna pair well with teals because it's, directly opposite on that stinking color wheel, and it's like,
yeah.
right,
And you forget
right.
sometimes.
Mhm. Or, opposite adjacent. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, I guess art class does help in this.
it does.
Thanks, college. But
Yeah, right.
not that you have to go to college to look at a color wheel, but I did take, an art methods class
Hmm.
for my teaching degree. And my art teacher happened to be the art teacher at the school I taught at.
Nice.
So that was really fun. But just those little things come in so handy for quilting that I'm like, oh, thanks, Linda
Well, you're
Boo. You're
doing
the
better
best.
than me. I at some point fancied myself interested in a double major, and I was like, I was going to do art, and I took one. I think it was art history, and I was like, no, because it was too much analyzing.
Mhm,
I was like, okay, actually, the shirt is red because they ran out of blue paint. Sometimes it's really that simple. And
mhm,
sometimes it's just like you look at the, like, I can look at a quilt and I can go, that just doesn't do it for me.
mhm,
And so then you're like, I think it needs purple. And
mhm.
it's just as simple as that. There
Yeah,
was not really a lot of thought that went into it. It was just, eh,
yeah,
this is what I'm going with today. I'm feeling red,
yeah,
whatever the case may be.
yeah, it's funny how much, like, weight is put on certain artists or certain even now, like, certain creators, like and it's like, "Oh, they must have had some prolific reason behind why they made this choice," when it really is sometimes that just like, "Well, I just know I don't know, I just it needed something different, so I just grabbed something else." So it's like, "Oh."
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because 'cause I'll listen to people talk about their process and their method, and the more words they use, the less I believe them. Because I'm like, having done art literally my entire life,
Mhm,
95% of it can be boiled down to, I looked at it and it wasn't right, so I picked something different because that's just what my brain said it needs this, and I went, "Okay, fine." And it
mhm,
looked good, so I left it,
mhm. Yeah.
you
It's
know?
super funny. Like and I not to I this is in no way meant to disrespect artists or anybody in their craft because I think, you know, people who design fabric prints or are creating art, like, I love
Mhm.
that because I think if that's
Yeah.
what speaks to your soul, then yeah, do that, and it's just I think, on the outside, people can tend to put more weight on things than needs to be placed there, and, like, my husband and I went to Spain this summer, and I made him go to a museum. I think it was, an early Picasso,
Okay.
um, yeah, anyway, and so it was just, like, all of his early sketching and, like, how his traditional art like, he was trained traditionally in painting and all this stuff, and so it's, like, a lot of that,
Uh-huh.
which was amazing, and then it's, like, as you go through the museum, it starts to get into more of his, like, weirder stuff,
Yeah.
and there's a room full of paintings of pigeons, and they're literally just, like, circles with like, lines off their backs for feathers, and my husband was like, "What are we looking at? I don't even know anymore." I'm like, "I don't know." And it's just this whole
Those
idea that it's like, "Oh, it's Picasso, it's this big deal," and I'm like, "But he literally painted the same thing 50 times just with different colors and, like,
those
maybe."
studies are funny too because I did a study abroad in Moscow right after high school, and we went
Mm,
to Tretyakov, and there's an entire wall size, like, huge, significantly large, I forget what the dimensions are, this stunning painting.
mhm,
Don't even remember the artist, but in the same room, they had all of the studies that
mm,
the artist did, so all these little tiny, and you just look and you're like, again, they did it 15 times because
mhm,
it wasn't right,
mhm.
and we don't know what was going through their head, but they're just like, "Eh, not feeling it."
Yeah,
But now there's not necessarily any meaning to be delved from that. It's just it's like,
they were just trying
eh
different shit.
yeah,
Yeah, it just got to a point where we were just like, "Okay, we get it." Like, he was doing stuff, like
and some of
and
those art museums are funny because you get to a point where you're like, "Okay, are we done yet?"
mhm.
Because there's a
Yeah,
lot.
it's a lot.
Just because it had somebody's name on it doesn't mean that it needs to be showcased.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's I know that his style and what he brought to the art community is a big deal, but I just think at the end of the day, it's just like he was just a person, trying to
Mhm,
express himself in the way that felt best for him, and, like
mhm.
and I think we, like, put people on pedestals when and then that's where we get this weird comparison game, and then that's where the judgment comes in, and then that's how we get into the situations we're talking about of, like, getting people who think that that their opinion has more weight than mine just because they think that their way is more important than mine, and,
Exactly.
like, I'm gonna defer to experts, and then and then I'm gonna do what's best for me from that information. And if you're just some random person sharing your opinion, like, I respect that you have an opinion, but I don't have to listen to it. And like, it just it all kind of circles back into that, like, we just gotta live and let live,
Mhm.
and support each other. Like, what is it gonna hurt if you give someone else encouragement, or you give them a
Yeah,
boost up instead of trying to tear them down to where you're at? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
and that is one of those things that it's just like I feel like women do this to each other far
Mm,
more, often than we will acknowledge, but it's
yeah.
like, "Oh, I've gotten to a certain point, but I don't want you to get to that point, so I'm gonna
Mhm.
crush your spirit, I'm gonna stomp on you, I'm gonna do whatever I need to do," and you're like, "Does it really hurt to just not do that?" I
Yeah.
I don't think so, like, nobody's taking away from you
Right.
by also doing this thing,
Right.
um,
I don't even know who it was, or it was, because it was just recently International Women's Day. I don't know what day it
mhm,
was, March 6th. I don't know. Anyway,
I don't know.
so of course there was like a ton of stuff being posted on Instagram and all this stuff, but I did see this post, and I'm so sorry if you know who it is and you can credit it, then do that in the comments. But like, she was just saying, like, it was a video of her just saying, like, I'm a safe woman. I'm not after your relationship. I'm not after your job. I'm not after your life, your style. Like, I'm just here existing in my own space, trying to make my life meaningful. And I am in no way doing any of this to threaten anyone else. Like, I'm just like, yeah, we need more of that energy, because I think too, even in this creative space of quilting, it is predominantly women. And
Uh-huh.
like, there's this whole idea that like we have to compete against each other because there's, only so much out there for each one of us. And I think that's bullshit. Like, we
It's not
all
a
have,
zero-sum game,
no, and we all
you
have
know?
infinite possibilities for anything we want to achieve in our lives. We just have to go
Yeah,
after it. And it's not anybody else's responsibility. So
yeah,
anyway, I'm here to be a safe woman for anybody who needs to know that. But
yeah,
I'm not after anything you've got. I just want to help shine lights on people who I think are doing good in this community. So
yeah.
I like it. But oh my gosh. Okay. I think I need to be done rambling. You probably
Story
have,
of my life.
right? Uh, but I have really enjoyed our conversation, and I appreciate uh having the space to do so with you and getting
Yeah,
to
thank you.
meet you in this way.
Yeah,
Another
yeah.
Amanda to be in solidarity
Oh
with.
god, it's so funny. I don't my entire life, it's not like there's not a million Amandas out there, but you run into and you're like, okay, yeah.
Mhm. You're like, "Oh, that's your name too? Okay, great. I'm
Okay."
not the only one in the room? Awesome. I love this for me."
Well, and I don't know how old you are, but, my mom has told me this story before. She's like, "Oh, there were no Amandas when you were born."
Mhm.
And there was some soap opera at the time where, like, 6 months later, one of the characters had a baby and named her Amanda, and after that,
Oh.
that's where and I was like, "Oh, okay.
Uh,
Fun. Thanks, mom." Not that I wanted a, unique name, but you're like, "Oh, okay."
yeah. No, I'm 37 for the record, but, my I think my great-great-great-grandmother was named Amanda,
Oh, nice.
I think, but that's a story I've heard, but I'm not sure. I also the other name that was, um my mom was contending with was Victoria, but she didn't want anybody to call me Vicky. So I'm
Oh,
really, I'm grateful for that. But
I like the name Victoria, but I wouldn't wanna be called Vicky either.
yeah. So
It's
not that I
like
have
right
anything
now
against Vicky, but
well, and I don't either. It's like there's a lot of Amandas who go by Mandy, but don't. Like the only
yeah.
people who literally are allowed to call me that are my mother, my sister, and my husband. Like,
Mm,
just don't do it.
yeah.
It drives
My
me nuts.
my family does, and like my grandparents and uncles and stuff, but my husband has literally never called me Mandy. Like, there's no one else. outside of my family that calls me Mandy, and I don't ever introduce myself that way, and nobody has
No.
ever even attempted to call me that. I've got lots of other nicknames, but
Well, it
Mandy
always
is not.
felt childish to me, and I remember being in the workplace at one point, and because this particular work environment, there were people I knew who knew me from school,
Mhm,
high school. They would call me like this dude would call me on the radio and call me
mhm,
Mandy, and I'm like, I'm not responding to you, and I just wouldn't. I would
yeah,
ignore him until he called me Amanda because I'm like, I am not a child,
yeah,
and I am at work.
right,
I have never presented myself that way. So,
right, unless you introduce yourself that way, like, don't call me that.
yeah, yeah. It's
And
like
yeah,
I don't know that I would care if it didn't feel like you were talking to, like, again, my mother calls me that.
right, right,
And I don't know about you, but I perpetually feel like a child in my mother's presence.
mhm,
So,
yeah, same,
you know,
which is like, you know, that is a little tricky spot for me working with her is like, I have to
yeah,
remember like, "Oh, I'm not 7, like,
yeah,
I'm a grown ass woman."
yeah.
And not that she's doing anything, like, I just
No.
that's my
It,
shit. Well, thank you again so much for joining me
thank
today.
you.
I've really enjoyed this, and I hope we stay in touch, and I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing your next new patterns come out, and
I promised a random woman in the quilt shop that I would have one by the end of May, but I plan to have one more out by the end of April.
okay,
So,
okay, that's good to know.
if not
So,
two.
okay, so we'll be looking for that this spring, and meanwhile, people can check you out. Where can people find you online, I guess?
The easiest is quiltitlist.com. And then there's a link to my Shopify on there. And if you search ALeeBCreative.com, I think it redirects to Quilt It List. So,
Okay, cool.
which
Well,
will
I will,
probably stay the way the
yeah.
way it is.
Okay. Well, I will put those links in the show notes so people can just get to you in one click. And otherwise, thanks again, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you.